First out to give us a testimony on their experience of summer 2018 is Geoff Kingston from easyJet. Geoff is the flight planning manager of easyJet. So, Geoff, I invite you here to give your presentation.
Good morning, everyone. So, I've been asked the question, what happened in 2018? Well, let's take a look. What was my view of 2018? Arguably, we were standing on the edge of a precipice. Some might say that we've already gone over the edge of that precipice. What was my view? It was a view of an OCC and flight planners burnt out and struggling to keep hold of the operation as early as May. It was an environment that had some observers describing the network as being at breaking point, and Joe's just alluded to it now, mentioned the word broken. So what does this look like in reality? Well, we're going to play a short numbers game to keep you all on your toes this morning, to wake you all up. I'm going to present a number, and you're going to guess what you think that number is. It's going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to start off with an easy one, 25 million. Now those with you with the EUROCONTROL hat on, and there's a lot of you in the room, should be able to answer this one. So can I open the floor to anybody who'd like to take a guess? Or shall I answer it for you?
easyJet passengers.
It's not easyJet passengers, way more. Might be easyJet delayed passengers, but we'll come on to that. 25 million was the total network delay, correct me if I'm wrong, for 2018. Now that was split between 19 million for en route minutes of delay and 6 million for aerodrome. Now had I been standing here a year ago telling you about 2017, I'd have told you that for easyJet, we'd have had a total of 750,000 minutes of en route delay, excluding weather. However, I'm stood here today telling you about 2018. So what do we reckon that number's gone up to? And I've given you a clue, it has gone up. That number has gone up to 1.3 million. 1.3 million. It's almost doubled in 1 year. Now, it wasn't just airspace where we saw significant congestion, aerodromes as well. So we'll add that in. What happens to the number? 1.6 million. Talking about huge numbers here. So within this operational environment, where are our pinch points? Well, let's take a look at the network attributable delay due to capacity alone. There's probably no surprises. So Maastricht, their contribution was 8.1%. For easyJet, that translated as 82,000 minutes of en route delay just due to capacity. Germany, DFS, 26.4% contribution. That translated as 255,000 minutes of en route delay just for capacity. And France, 30.8%, almost 600,000 minutes of en route delay. 75%. What's the relevance of 75%? 75% of our flights operate through French airspace. Now, I imagine the number for Germany and the Maastricht area is not much lower. The reason I've put this in is to demonstrate how exposed we are as an operator to the performance of those ANSPs. Significant exposure. So what does this look like on an individual flight basis? About a year ago, I gave a presentation to the DSNA, in fact, saying how we were going to use our own data to identify our own hotspots in the network, and from that take pre-tactical mitigation measures. We looked at the worst performing call signs, and back in 2017, this was just for summer 2017, our worst performing call sign was the Easy 64 Charlie Victor, which happened to be a Gatwick to Nice flight. Now bear in mind, we have multiple Gatwick-Nice flights a day. This was just one of them over the course of the summer period. That one call sign had 2,800 minutes of delay associated to it just in terms of capacity, 47 hours. We ran the figures again for 2018, and coincidentally enough, it wasn't the Gatwick-Nice, It was the Nice Gatwick. This time, the numbers had increased to 3,200, 54 hours worth of delay. Begging the question, why do we supposedly optimise through these known areas when that's going to be the end result? It's not just the big delays that we targeted. We looked at underperforming lines of flying. So I'll give you an example of an aircraft that we have in our Paris Orly base. That aircraft through the summer period on a Saturday was operating 2 rotations to Fiumicino and an evening rotation through Naples. That's 6 sectors that all routed through Marseille Airspace. Now the individual delays through those 6 sectors weren't particularly big, but the cumulative effect through the day meant that almost every single Saturday that aircraft was ending up in Charles de Gaulle because of the Orly curfew. So we had an aircraft out of base, we had a crew out of base, we had passengers in the wrong place. All of that knocked into the following day and meant we were starting off on the back foot in Orly that following morning. So what did we do? Well, we took measures to say, let's not optimise in that way and let's avoid a known problem area. So what else happened in 2018? Well, we had industrial action and multiple periods of it. I'm not trying to single out our French colleagues in the room. I realise I might have picked on them on the last few slides. However, for those that are in the room, 16. Who wants to guess this? Now I was corrected from this when I said 19 the last time I gave this presentation. 16? 16 days that the Marseille ACCC were on strike last year. More than 2 weeks, effectively. Now, I say I'm singling out our DS&A colleagues. There's a lovely slide coming on a little bit later, which I promise you will enjoy. However, in the build-up to those strike periods, I must commend the DS&A. We worked very closely together in terms of coming up with mitigation routes to try and avoid any problems on the day. However, it must be said that the restrictions in our flight planning systems, they're not agile enough to simply say that on a weekend where we can make some changes in the rules, allow your systems to go and optimise. With the rigid nature of the RAD instructions in those systems, it's a huge, huge amount of workload to plan those avoidance routes at such short notice. However, we did it, but that was on top of what was already significant busy days back in May. Even with all of that combined effort, the total slot delay during those strike periods was 157,000, call it 158,000 minutes of delay, just attributable to industrial action. Now that doesn't even factor in the knock-on delays, it doesn't factor in the mandatory cancellations. That's effectively the tip of the iceberg. Now it wasn't just France, Italy as well, we had the same issue. And again, mass cancellations, mass delays with knock-on effects. Now it's all very well me standing here quoting minutes of delay, be it for capacity, be it for industrial action. What does that actually mean in reality? What does it mean in reality for our customers, the disruption they face, and our reputation as an airline? I'm going to give you another number, 150,000. 150,000 easyJet customers either had their flight cancelled or delayed by more than 3 hours, where ATC alone was the root cause. And again, that's just the root cause. That doesn't account for knock-on effects, knock-on delays, or knock-on cancellations. But it's still a number. What does it look like in reality? Well, imagine the Olympic Stadium in Berlin filled twice over. It's a lot of people. A lot of people who go home thinking, that was my easyJet experience. Now, I'd like to try something a little bit different. Could everybody in the room please raise their hands if they know what that is? Okay, could anybody, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Could anybody representing an airline put their hands down? Everybody else keep their hands up. That has worked, yeah. The point I'm trying to make is this thing called EU261 is not very well known outside of the airline community. We're about to change that. So what is EU261? EU261 is EU legislation that says every customer, every passenger who's had their flight cancelled or delayed by more than 3 hours is eligible to compensation. And when I say compensation, I don't mean a refund of the flight fare, I mean compensation. So I could have spent £50 flying from Gatwick to Paphos. My flight's delayed by 3 hours and 1 minute. I don't get my £50 back, I get potentially £600 back because it's based on the sector length. Tell you what else EU261 is. It's the fastest growing cost of European airlines. It's not just the compensation itself we're liable for. There's also the disruption costs associated with cancellations and delays. If we overnight delay somewhere, for example, obviously hotels need to be paid for, buses need to be paid for. If we've got passengers where we've had to cancel flights and they're stuck, repatriation flights on other airlines, that all adds up. 26,000. £26,000 is the average payout for every flight that's either cancelled or delayed by more than 3 hours. So when we phone the help desk asking for a couple of minutes of improvement on a flight, it may not appear significant by itself, but if that's the end result of a cumulative delay through the day, it could be the difference between us paying out for this figure. Here's another huge number, which I'm not allowed to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because it's the only way I can stress the importance of this. So 19 million is how much easyJet spent on disruption over what period? A year? A season? Month? 2 weeks. In the first 2 weeks of August last year, we spent 19 million on disruption. Some airlines would take that as a good year's profit, 19 million. We blew it up the wall in 2 weeks. So what does Cristiano Ronaldo have to do with EU261? Now the number I definitely can't tell you is how much we spent on disruption for the whole year. However, it's the equivalent of adding Ronaldo, Luis Suarez, and Paul Pogba. Told you get a slide that you liked, for those of you in France. It's the equivalent of adding all three of those to my flight planning strike force for the summer 19 season. It's a huge, huge number. I'm going to show you another picture. Hopefully you can all see that clearly, and hopefully there's some alarm bells ringing. This is a Gatwick to Alicante flight, which is fair to say has not taken the most optimum route to get from A to B. However, these are the lengths we're prepared to go to try and avoid those disruption figures. Now, a couple of months ago, I heard a presentation from Thomas Cook, that Chris Woodland gave, and he indicated that for Thomas Cook last year, the additional distance they flew away from optimal routes in order just to avoid en route slot restrictions was the equivalent to flying around the Earth 9 times. It's huge additional distances to try and avoid these problems. The operational environment has forced us to reconsider our priorities. Where once upon a time it was all about fuel efficiency and the flight plan efficiency being up here, our network, our operational efficiency was down here. Now it's changing. We will take measures like this to keep our overall operation efficient. Now, with a disruption bill as high as I've just shown you, the additional cost in fuel for doing a route like this, as well as the en route charges, pales into insignificance. However, it's a measure we've been forced to take. Is it fair? Yeah, as all airlines have, we have a spare aircraft allocation to try and recuperate delays. So we pay for that. We have spare crews around the network. That all comes at a cost. We take measures like this to try and keep all of our flights on time. We spend the extra fuel, we spend the navigation charges. We reroute flights into neighbouring airspace to try and avoid a delay. However, given the problems we know we've had in 2018, we still get enough of a cumulative slot delay that we end up paying out EU261. So we've taken every single measure we can possible at huge cost to us, yet we still end up being hit with 261. Is that fair? What does an ANSP pay for not reaching its performance target? I can assure you it's not £90 million in 2 weeks. However, where there is potential for loss is when we pre-tactically plan to avoid these routes. So the example I gave you for our Orly to Fiumicino rotation, what did we do? We made a slight route adjustment. That flight plan now spends a lot more time in Italian airspace than it does in French airspace. 1 or 2 minutes extra flying, a couple of £100 extra pounds, but we're not paying out £26,000 and having an aircraft in the wrong place every Saturday night. So we heard at the beginning, 25 million minutes of delay in the European network, 2018. So the question for 2019, Joe's alluded to it, what if we did nothing? If we did nothing and approached it in the same way, there's suggestions that we could add approximately 12 million minutes of delay to the network. Doing nothing simply isn't an option. What comes after this? Well, I mentioned at the beginning, breaking point. I've even heard in these corridors the word crisis is being said. What comes after a crisis? It's a system that's broken with huge economic and social repercussions. There's no silver bullet to this, but we have to take every single action within our power to avoid this happening. Now, to quote the manager of easyJet's hometown football club, we need to control the controllables. I'm sure it wasn't him who came up with that expression, but for argument's sake, we'll pretend it was Mr. Still. So what is in your control? What's in our control? What are we doing as an airline? We're investing heavily in more spare aircraft. That's a number of spare aircraft that you wouldn't typically associate with a low-cost airline, but it's an action we've been forced to take. Again, bear in mind that disruption bill. When you balance the two together of the cost of aircraft and the recovery you can do, that's the reality of what we face at the moment. As I mentioned, using data to create a more efficient schedule. Now, given the restriction of runway slots, we're restricted with how much we can do for summer 19. The benefit should come in 2020. What else are we doing? We're splitting our crew's duties. So where a crew may have typically operated 4 sectors, they're now only operating 2 sectors. Why have we done that? It comes back to this cumulative effect. If they're consistently picking up delays through the day, they're getting closer and closer to that period where their hours expire. By splitting them into 2, we're giving them more hours. Great. You need to do that, you need more staff. Again, more cost. I mentioned it before, we now have a pre-tactical flight planning function, which is looking at short, medium and long-term mitigation plans, that we can build those measures back into our flight planning system and file a more intelligent flight plan schedule on the day of operation. Part of that is liaising more closely with our ANSPs. You're the experts of your airspace. Tell us what works, tell us what doesn't work, tell us what we can do to try and alleviate some of the issues. What are you doing to help? And when I say you, I mean this whole room, the aviation community. What's in your power? What do you have control of that you can do something about? Like I said, there's no silver bullet to this, but if you can identify every single opportunity available to you and exploit it, it puts us in a better position than last year. What do we need you to do? Again, it's already been mentioned this morning. Talk to us. Tell us what we need to do. Tell us what action can be taken by everyone where there's opportunities you've identified to benefit the network. For ANSPs, improve that coordination with the network manager so that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet on the day of operation. Not just with the network manager, with your neighbouring ANSPs. What can be done in that relationship to identify any efficiencies and exploit them? Robust staffing. Now let's not just look at short-term periods. We want to be looking at a robust, medium, long-term staffing programme across all sectors. As I say, doing nothing simply isn't an option. If we do nothing, I could be stood back here in 12 months and you could be asking me what happened in 2019. Well, I told you at the beginning we were staring at a precipice. So in 2019, let's not allow ourselves to be in free fall and at the end of it, end up in a very ugly mess. Thank you for your time.